Welcome to Module 3. Can you believe we've made it this far and during this period of time? I'm laying this out for you, and I just want to remind everyone, because there's a little confusion I had on the syllabus, that Module 3 will cover Chapter 7, 8, and 9. We won't be doing Chapter 6. And then for the future, at the next module, we're going to be transitioning into more of a practical experience for you, where you're going to develop a budget and work with someone you know in the public sector and kind of learn a hands-on part of this. So we'll get away from some of the problems and number crunching that we're doing now. But let me do kind of an overview and kind of a summary of what we'll be covering. In Chapter 7, we're going to kind of shift away from planning, and we're going to per se and move more into implementation, actually moving budgets in and activating them, and we're going to get into ideas of control. And sometimes control isn't necessarily the glamorous part of what we do, but it's a very vital part of that. We're going to talk about short-term resources, how to capitalize on those, how to use those to enhance them financially, but at the same time trying to maximize the benefits of the short-term things, but also reduce or lessen the short-term obligations. So you're trying to get the revenue or the positive financial side up. At the same time, you're trying to keep the cost and things down. An example for me in the federally qualified health center model, I talked about it earlier, that we worked very hard to actually get the cost up in our first year, because that's how they set our Medicaid and Medicare rates. But then, so that's good, but then after that, you're trying to lower those costs. That's how then your revenue will be able to cover more things and do more things to help people. We're going to talk also about working capital and a number of aspects related to cash management. We'll talk about liquidity management, how to kind of work your way and stretch through that process. And then we'll talk about the idea, of course, of account receivables and account payables. Money's coming in, or things going out. So that's Chapter 7, pretty much in a nutshell. Chapter 8, we've talked about planning, of course, earlier, and now you have to hold individuals and different departments accountable. So you set certain goals and criteria where you want to see things go, and now you, as a manager, you have to work very hard to hold people accountable and make sure they're accomplishing some of the tasks or goals that you've set out. So in this vein, we'll discuss management control systems. We'll also talk about controlling quality, how important that is. You want to do the financial part, but you also want to control the quality of things too. We'll talk about the term variance, what that means, learn about the concept of that. We'll talk about the ethics and how those relate in the financial management field. And then we'll talk about elements of the control system, such as an audit trail, separation of powers. Let me give you an example, and I don't want to go into great detail, but one of the first things I ran into as a new manager was a situation where someone was taking funds, actually taking cash from the department. And so there was a variety of things we were able to investigate and take care of that issue, but one of the mistakes I made was working on separation of power. Or I'm sorry, separation of power or duties, rather. You want to have one person maybe counting the money coming in, then on the reverse side, you want a person documenting and putting away. You don't want the money coming in. You don't want the person on the beginning stage and the ending stage. So those are called separations of power or duties. So those are some of the things we will talk about. We'll talk about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was developed a few years back as a way to kind of oversee things from the federal government. And that'll be the main concepts we'll cover in Chapter 8. In Chapter 9, I'll introduce you to the idea, you'll be introduced to the idea of financial accounting. You'll work through statements of financial position and of course on a balance sheet. You'll work with that process. I don't know how many of you ever heard of the term GAAP, but what that means, and we'll talk about that, is generally accepted accounting principles. Those are kind of the rules, the hard and fast things you have to do in accounting. So it's GAAP, G-A-P-P, generally accepted accounting principles. And so we'll cover that. The idea of accrual accounting basis, we'll go through that a little bit again. And it's very confusing. The county, as I work in now, the governmental sector, is a cash-based system. The federal government requires us on our bookkeeping and processes on the Federally Qualified Health Center to be accrual-based. And so it's kind of a contradiction. It's a different way of doing accounting. We don't have any choice, and that often leads to confusion. So you have to be able to shift yourself into the cash basis away from doing it from an accrual basis. We'll talk about assets categories such as cash, marketable securities, account receivables, prepaid expenses, and the idea of sinking funds. It's not the Titanic, and well, actually, I think I've got a problem I'm going to assign to you with that kind of idea. We'll talk about various liability categories, including accounts and wages payable and long-term debt. That's something that you'll have to work through in terms of that issue. What I've hoped to do, one of the things I have started doing is sending you the PowerPoints, and I hope that's helping some of you kind of work through some of the problems. I'm very pleased with how the students are, how you're doing is so far. You're moving along. I said from the beginning that you're not going to get your CPA when you complete this course. I want to expose you to practical financial issues that you'll run into in your day-to-day management as you become future leaders or in your current job. Many of you may already be in that capacity. And then, as I said in the beginning, we'll be moving soon into Module 4. We'll take in a break somewhat from the book, and this is a time for you to gain practical, firsthand experience kind of on the job. And so those are kind of the concepts. Again, I'm pleased where we are so far. You have done a nice job, and I want to kind of keep working through things with you. I will come back on Module 4 and do a little bit of an overview at that time. Keep up the hard work, and I appreciate it, and we'll be working together on these financial issues.